A newborn zebra can stand within minutes of being born, and within an hour it can run fast enough to escape a lion. A human baby, by comparison, cannot even lift its own head, cannot walk, cannot feed itself. It cannot survive more than a few hours without another person keeping it alive. And somehow, this is the species that ended up ruling the planet. That contradiction is stranger than it sounds. Every other animal on Earth seems to understand something we apparently forgot. If you're going to bring a life into a dangerous world, you'd better make sure it can take care of itself fast. Humans didn't get that memo. We're the only species on the planet that produces offspring so fragile, so useless, so entirely dependent, that without constant help, a human baby would die within days. So why would evolution, a process obsessed with survival, design something this vulnerable? If you enjoy questions like this, the kind that make you look at ordinary life completely differently, this is exactly the type of thing we dig into here, so it's worth sticking around and subscribing before we go any further. To understand what happened, you have to go back millions of years, to a moment when our ancestors were still walking on all fours. At some point, something changed. Our ancestors began standing upright, walking on 2 legs instead of 4. It seems like a small shift, but it rearranged the entire structure of the human body, including the shape of the female pelvis. To walk efficiently on 2 legs, the pelvis had to narrow. At the exact same time, something else was happening. The human brain was getting bigger, dramatically bigger. Over millions of years, our skulls expanded to hold a brain roughly 3 times larger than that of our closest ape relatives. And that's where evolution ran into a brutal problem. A narrower pelvis, a rapidly growing skull. 2 changes happening at once, both essential for our survival as a species, and both working directly against each other. Here's the twist that most people never think about. If a baby's head grew to full size before birth, birth itself would become nearly impossible. The math simply wouldn't work. A skull large enough to carry a fully developed human brain could not fit through a pelvis narrow enough to support upright walking. So our species found a workaround. Instead of solving that problem, evolution simply avoided it. Human babies are born with a brain that's still wildly unfinished, only about a quarter of its eventual adult size. Compare that to a chimpanzee, born with a brain already around half of its adult size, and you start to see just how extreme this trade-off really is. In other words, human babies are born too early. Not because something goes wrong, because it has to happen that way. Some scientists even describe the first year of a human baby's life as a kind of 4th trimester, an extension of pregnancy that continues outside the womb, simply because there was no other way to get that oversized brain out safely. Think about that the next time you see a newborn asleep in someone's arms. What looks like the beginning of life is actually still, biologically speaking, the tail end of development that couldn't finish on schedule. But this is where the story takes an even stranger turn. If human brains had to be rescued from an impossible birth, why not just slow down the growth and finish developing after birth, quietly, without complications? Why are human babies born completely helpless, unable to even hold up their own heads, while a baby horse is up and walking within the hour? The answer connects to something happening deep inside that unfinished brain. At birth, a human brain isn't just small. It's still being wired. Billions of neurons are forming connections at a staggering rate, shaped directly by the environment the baby is born into. The sounds it hears, the faces it sees, the voices, the smells, the rhythm of being held. A zebra's brain, by contrast, comes almost fully assembled, pre-programmed with the instincts it needs to survive immediately. Run. Follow the herd. Recognize danger. There's no room for customization because there's no time for it. Human brains work the opposite way. Ours are built to be shaped after birth, not before. And that single difference may be one of the most important reasons our species became what it is today. This is where researchers studying brain development uncovered something that completely reframed how we think about human infancy. What looks like weakness, an infant that can't move, can't speak, can't defend itself, is actually the price we paid for flexibility. A zebra is born ready for one specific life. A human is born ready for almost anything. A snowy mountain village, a crowded city, a small island, a language with clicks or tones or 1,000 different sounds. Because none of that is hardwired in advance. It gets built after birth, shaped by whatever world the baby happens to land in. That helplessness wasn't a flaw evolution failed to fix. It was the mechanism that made us adaptable enough to survive in nearly every environment on the planet. There's another layer to this that rarely gets talked about. Because human babies are born so early, they experience something almost no other animal does. They spend their first months absorbing an enormous amount of the outside world while still being built. A baby zebra never has to figure out language, culture, or the specific dangers of its particular environment, because evolution already installed the answers before birth. A human baby has to learn all of it from scratch in real time while its brain is still under construction. Every lullaby, every face leaning over the crib, every unfamiliar sound becomes raw material shaping a mind that arrived unfinished on purpose. And this dependency created something else, something you can still see clearly today, every time you watch a parent respond instantly to a crying baby. Human infants can't run from danger, so they evolved a different survival strategy entirely. They make sure an adult never leaves. A baby's cry isn't just noise. It's engineered, almost surgically, to be unbearable to ignore. Studies on infant crying have found that the pitch and pattern are specifically tuned to trigger stress responses in the adult brain, discomfort powerful enough to make sleep-deprived parents get up at 3 in the morning, night after night, without ever needing to be convinced. That single evolutionary trick, helplessness paired with an alarm system nobody can tune out, kept human infants alive long enough for their brains to finish the job that birth interrupted. And this dependency didn't just shape babies. It shaped us. Raising a human infant has never been something one person could reasonably manage alone. That reality likely helped push our ancestors toward deeper cooperation. Extended families, shared caregiving, entire communities built partly around the demands of children who couldn't survive without enormous, sustained investment. Some researchers argue this constant need for shared care may have been one of the quiet forces behind human social complexity itself. You can actually see this trade-off playing out in something as ordinary as a baby's grip. Newborns instinctively curl their tiny fingers around anything pressed into their palm, a reflex so strong it can support their own body weight for a few seconds. Scientists believe it's a leftover instinct from a time when infant primates needed to cling to their mother's fur while she moved through the trees. It's a strange kind of proof, a 5-minute-old human still holding onto an ancient survival strategy that predates the very trade-off that made it necessary. Even in its most helpless moment, that tiny hand is quietly remembering something older than language itself. So the next time you see a newborn baby, red-faced, crying, utterly unable to do anything for itself, you're not just looking at fragility. You're looking at the physical evidence of a trade our species made millions of years ago. Brains over independence, flexibility over instinct, connection over self-sufficiency. Every time a parent gets up at 3 a.m. for a crying child, every time a baby locks eyes with someone and their whole face relaxes, that's not weakness playing out in real time. That's the oldest deal our species ever made, quietly still being paid. A zebra was born ready for the world. We were born to build one.